It's Friday, the 5th of May, 2024.
The last word in podcasting news. This is the Pod News Weekly Review with James Cridland and Sam Sethi.
Yes, I'm James Cridland, the editor of Pod News in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia.
And I'm Sam Sethi, the CEO of True Fans. Well, after Independence Day, America has a king again, and we are free of the Tories.
Anyway, in the chapters today, Spotify now has 250,000 video podcasts on its platform. Happy 19th birthday, Apple Podcasts. Google Podcasts, has it gone yet? And do you prefer me in English or in French or in Japanese or more? Plus...
Hey, I'm Kim Fox, and later we'll be talking about podcasting in Egypt.
She will. This podcast is sponsored by Buzzsprout, podcast hosting made easy, with easy and powerful tools, free learning materials, a beautiful new logo, and remarkable customer support.
From your daily newsletter, the Pod News Weekly Review.
Like a child in the backseat of a car, James. Are we there yet? Is Google dead?
I mean, Google isn't, but Google Podcasts is finally, more than a week late, is now dead. Yes, it was supposed to have been turned off last week. It wasn't. It was still available. It was still available for download, which is very strange. And yes, it's finally been turned off. You can no longer use it in your phone. And they've now got rid of it from the Google Play Store for all new users. It still exists in there if you are a current user, because that way you get any updates if they're going to do that. Closing down a relatively popular podcast app, but it has finally gone away.
Sure, no fingers are creeping back through the old coffin.
No, I think that's it. I think it's dead, Jim.
As they say, never build on Google these days. You can't rely on them anymore. I genuinely believe you cannot rely on Google now.
No.
I think you talked about Gmail not supporting standards a couple of weeks ago. I don't think search is holding up well right now. I think they've had their first real competition. I don't know. Good luck, Google. And yet the share price is at an all-time high. Well done, markets.
And yet the share price is at an all-time high. Congratulations, John Spurlock. But yes, no, Google not in a great place. I'm, moving as much away from Google as I possibly can. It was very strange. Logging into the Wi-Fi in this hotel, what they give you once you've correctly logged in with your username and your room number, just so that they can monitor exactly what your internet habits are. Once you've done that, then it dumps you into a Google search. And I looked at it and I thought, what is this page? I've not seen this in quite some time, because I've used Kaji for the last 9 months.
Right.
So yes, all of a sudden it was, this is a bit quaint, isn't it? Anyway, enough about Google.
Right.
Let's talk about our new overlords, Spotify.
Yes. Now, Spotify, a couple of weeks ago, or even last week, you talked about them having the ability for you to upload video separately. Well, it looks like Spotify now has 250,000 video podcasts on its platform, according to its blog post. The number of creators actively publishing video each month has grown nearly 70% year on year. This looks like they're really going for it, James.
Yes, it does. I mean, it looks as if they see there being real opportunity in terms of video. I would guess that there are other ways of monetizing video podcasts. Of course, additional costs as well. But let's not forget, the more listening that happens on the Spotify platform to things that aren't music, the less they have to pay to the musicians. And that's probably part of the thinking there.
I also think it's defensive against YouTube as well, I suppose. But Buzzsprout, our sponsors, wanted me to make it clear that they have never said they won't ever have video. They won't just do it now due to the high costs. But I think, again, I genuinely believe we have ceded. I don't think we are ceding. I think we have ceded video to YouTube and Spotify now.
But I mean, you are seemingly copying quite a lot from Spotify now, aren't you? You've ended up being a bit of a fanboy.
I am. I'm going to say it. I am an absolute fanboy. I think 2 years ago when they were struggling and it looked like they were having challenges, I thought, probably not going to make it. And they have pulled it out of the bag time and time again. The video stuff they've done really well. I think they'll do a lot more with it over the next 6 to 12 months. if you look at they've added courses, they've added events, they've added ticketing, they've added merch, they've got polls. It's okay. A lot of it's proprietary to just Spotify, but do they care? They're growing market share. They are profitable. I think there was a GitHub post that I put something up about True Fans adding blogging to our platform this week. It's an all-in-one app. They're keeping you within the walled garden. So your video is to stop you going over to YouTube. And yet a lot of the podcasting hosts and apps are just saying, no, just go over to YouTube to watch video. No, we're not adding the medium attributes for audiobooks or courses or blogging or anything else. No, we're going to stick to medium equals podcast. And then we're watching market share drop. And we'll talk about stats later on. But no, I'm sorry. Spotify have got this smack on the nose and they are killing it right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am a little bit of a fanboy.
Yeah, Spotify doing a lot of things well. They've just announced that they are going to be doing another interesting masterclass. It's a masterclass on leveraging video on Spotify. We're promised a live watch party and a Q&A. It's on July the 25th if you want to sign up to that. podnews.net/events is worthwhile. And they're clearly still working on stuff because they've also told us all that the Interact tab in Spotify for podcasters, that's where you can see all of the many millions of responses that you get from people saying, what did you think of this episode? In Spotify for podcasters, they are doing some work on that on July the 8th. Doing some background updates. Maybe there's a man with a beard doing some database migration or something. But anyway, all of that is going on. So clearly stuff going on with Spotify. Also, Spotify, clearly betting a bit of their house at least on video, and quite rightly so. Edison Research saying that 79% of weekly podcast listeners in the US have listened to podcasts that have video, and 72% of those actively watched the screen. So, even Edison Research saying that there is some real consumption going on there.
If I look, a sample of two, right? If I look at my two children, I say children, adults now, 24 and 19, and they will be cooking with their iPhones, watching podcasts on Spotify. That's how they do it. And they're very happy to do that. And they will, and even when I say who skips ads, they don't even skip the ads. They just let the ads sit in the background and just, while they're cooking and eating and watching, and they'll just let it run. And that's how they consume. And I assume they're not, outliers. I assume that's how most teenagers and young adults consume and watch podcasts.
I assume so. Yes, video. Who'd have thought it? I'm resisting the whole video push. Who wants video?
We don't need to do video. No. Now, our sponsors, Buzzsprout, they've had a redesign, James. Tell me more.
Yes, they have. It's a beautiful redesign. It was for customers only earlier on in the week. They've now redesigned everything. And they've got a new logo, which has a sort of it's a buzz and that is sprouting. It's a buzz with leaves. They've done some, crisper greens and everything all looks a little bit nice. The new font family for the company is a font called Graphic with a K. It's all very fancy. There is a beautiful, beautiful blog post, which we linked from the Pod News newsletter on Wednesday, talking about Buzzsprout's original website 15 years ago. And my goodness, you have a look at that. It is, it's a work of pure beauty. Much more intricate than the current Buzzsprout website, and lots of sort of backgrounds and very careful gradients and everything else, but yes, quite a thing. So Alban Brook has done a good job there of making a refreshed Buzzsprout, but also the other thing that I thought was interesting is that they have changed their tagline to really talk about keeping people podcasting. And I think this is exactly where podcast hosts ought to be going, is not just giving people the tools to help them podcast for the first time. It's actually giving people tools to keep them podcasting, making stuff easier, whether that's with Co-Host AI, whether that's with some of the other tools that they have, Magic Mastering and so on and so forth, just keeping it easier so that people can just focus on keeping podcasting. And I think that's a very bright move from the people there. So many congratulations.
I believe they also used or worked with Cameron Moll as well. So hat tip to him. So, yeah. Now, last week we talked about the New York Times, James, starting a paywall to put podcasts and other content behind it. Now, it seems that Nick Hilton, friend of the show, thought he'd write a very thought-provoking piece in Medium called "The New York Times Demonstrate the Bifurcation of the Podcast Industry." And I had to look up what bifurcation was, first of all. He's far too smart for me. But yes, it's the splitting of the industry. But anyway, the comment that he came through with was fundamentally, it's the end of the free podcast. Podcasting 1.0 is now dead. Podcasting 2.0 is here, and we are seeing the end of free. What's your thought, James?
Oh, well, I don't know about that. I think certainly there are some people moving away from ad-supported shows and moving into a paid subscription model. We've seen that over the last couple of years with Apple Podcasts, of course, as well. But I'm not so sure. I mean, let's not conflate podcasting 2.0 with whatever it is that friend of the show Nick Hilton is talking about. I think that would be a mistake. But I do think that there are clearly moves away from ad-supported shows, because ad-supporting, if you go and ask Adam Curry, then advertising, will never work. You cannot monetize the network and all that kind of stuff. I do think that there is something in saying that advertising is not necessarily the best way of supporting these types of media, services. But it's still early days, though, isn't it?
I think we'll see more newspapers begin to see this as a revenue stream, and I think we'll start to see the doors closing. But again, I think if we want to see micropayments, and we have talked about, why has there not been an adoption of it, the pay-as-you-go model, which is what micropayments is, as opposed to advertising or subscription. Maybe that's the window that will open when podcasting isn't free for all. Who knows? Yeah,
there does seem to be some kind of cyclical thing where, and you can see this if you go to podcastbusinessjournal.com/data, which has a bunch of data that comes in from the rest of the industry. You can see this kind of cyclical thing going on where people are where the amount of active podcasts seems to have been slowly going down from about March of this year. And it seemed to do that last year as well. What I should probably do is grab as much of this data as I can over a couple of years and actually see how the data has been going there. But there does appear to be a little bit of a drop there, which is probably something worthwhile keeping an eye on. But in terms of downloads, Buzzsprout has the best download data. I'm not just saying that because they're our sponsor. I'm also saying that because it's true. They have some excellent download data for 98 million downloads on their platform for June. And interestingly, there's a real jump for web browsers in June. Web browsers seemed to increase really quite a lot. Now, yes, it's still small numbers, but web browsers seem to have increased quite a lot, which is interesting. They're now responsible for 8.7% of all downloads to shows on the Buzzsprout platform. Not quite sure what's going on there, Sam, apart from maybe they're all using True-Fans. Maybe that's...
And if that was true, I would be the happiest boy ever, but it's not.
Maybe that's the thing. I don't know.
In fact, very oddly, I was just going to add, I had a really good conversation yesterday with Pocket Casts about some of this stuff, talking to Ali. And one of the things that I also did was I spoke to Alban a couple of weeks ago. We interviewed him about the new Android Buzzsprout app. And Alban said one thing. He said, look, you're fighting too many fires, right? So we're trying to get people to understand podcasting 2.0. We're trying to get people to understand SATs. We're trying to now, with True Fans, trying to get you to understand what a PWA is. And so often I get, I want to install True Fans, but I couldn't find it in any of the app stores. And I'm like, oh my God. And as much as I want to be true to the open ecosystem, and I've called Apple Flash 2, and I will continue to call it Flash 2 till the day I die, I'm going to have to capitulate. The problem is people are not getting it and no one's giving them any messaging. Apple is consistently messaging. The only way to get anything on their phone is through the App Store. And so you can fight the fight as much as you like, but you have to sometimes give up. And I think, with True Fans, we will see now an iOS and an Android version very shortly. I'm afraid I'm having to give that battle up.
Yes, I think it's interesting watching that and interesting seeing, what is capable. I mean, certainly I have noticed that, even now the Android platform is much better at understanding how these websites can work as mobile apps. And I'm sure that part of that is just Apple hobbling how their system works. But yes, very interesting. But I also wonder whether or not the web browser thing is also some of these companies who are selling advertising within games and stuff like that, because those will appear as if they're just a web browser. And I wonder whether there's just a rise of that as well. It's interesting times.
Well, going back to my Spotify fanboyish moments. I mean, that's one of the things that Spotify does brilliantly. They are wherever. We say wherever you get your podcasts, and Spotify say wherever you get Spotify. Yeah. I mean, because, they literally are on everything and every app and every device. I mean, so it's the default for nearly everybody because of that.
Yeah.
Hint, Apple.
Yeah, no, indeed. And it's on many, many, many different surfaces. Two other things from the Buzzsprout stats, which are interesting. Firstly, Apple iTunes is the 5th most popular way of listening to shows, with 2.1% of all downloads. Now, Apple iTunes is only available on Windows machines. And frankly, you're only going to use it if, I'm not even quite sure why you would use it. Why would you use iTunes? Don't really know.
Because you haven't upgraded?
Yeah. I mean, that's weird, isn't it? That's a long, long time ago. So that's interesting. But also interesting is Google Podcasts, God rest its soul. It posted, in its final month, it posted a 1% share of downloads. So goodbye, Google Podcasts. We knew you well.
Now, James, you call yourself a radio futurologist, right? Who gave you that name?
Well, I normally start conference speeches off by saying a lot of people ask me how I managed to call myself a radio futurologist, and the answer is business cards. If you print your own business cards, you can call yourself anything, and it normally gets a laugh, which is nice. But last week, I saw the podcast professor. I saw Kim Fox. She teaches at the American University in Cairo in Egypt. She teaches podcasting, radio and audio courses, and she runs Podfest Cairo. And I wondered, how did she get to call herself the podcast professor?
Self-appointed. Like, you can't wait for someone to give you a title. Like, take advantage of the situation. But it was just something, you can change your name on Twitter, just kind of put it out there, like let people know this is the thing that I like to do. I do very well. I teach podcasting. I do academic research on podcasting. And I also have a podcast.
And you're in Cairo. How did that come about?
I don't have a sexy story. Like, I saw a job posting and they were looking for someone to teach radio production. The job posting was in the Chronicle of Higher Education, so it is a very known place of looking for jobs, good jobs. I did a little bit of research and I said, well, I want to give it a try. I said, it's like the lottery. You got to be in it to win it. And if I can get the job, then I can decide if I want to keep it or if I want to say, no, I'm going to pass. But I did decide to take it. I negotiated out of a long-term contract and took a 9-month contract because we were doing video interviews back in 2008. So this is really pre-Zoom days. And that's kind of how I got into it.
And you came from a background of, radio and TV?
Mostly radio. Worked in college radio. But our college radio was an NPR affiliate. So it was a proper radio station, WOUB in Athens, Ohio. But I also worked at WOSU in Columbus, Ohio. That was the one that let me get away. I was working there, and when I got the job offer in Cairo, I said, hey, why don't you all give me an unpaid leave to go and explore this other thing? And they said no. So then I thought, well, this is not really a dilemma, is it? I said, yeah, I'm out, deuces. And so, yeah, that was that leap of faith. Like, I have no idea what this other job is like, but I'm going to give it a try because the one that I have is not quite working out.
And so where am I talking to you today?
Well, yeah, I'm in Brisbane visiting. I'm like, who's in Brisbane? I'm like, oh, James Critland is here, really? And I did. I went and looked at your Twitter bio, like, where is he in Australia? This is a big place. And yeah, I was here everyone told me it would be better to fly into Brisbane. I had a conference at the Gold Coast. So took that, 90-minute ride or 2-hour ride up to the Gold Coast for the conference for the International Communication Association. But then we had a podcast studies roundtable think tank here in Brisbane at Griffith University. And then we toured some community radio stations. Just a lot of fun, a lot of good people from this part of the world mostly. So I spent a lot of time, in the U.S. or dealing with folks from the U.K. and Europe. So it was nice to come here and really pick up on a different community who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in.
So what's the podcast landscape like in Egypt and that part of the world? Is it very different to the podcast landscape here or in the US?
I think it is. It's really hard to nail down, actually, because Egypt is a really trendy kind of market, meaning people will say, I'm listening to your podcast or your podcast is popular. But then after a couple of months or a year, they will fall off as listeners, which will impact, of course, the person who's doing the production. What I'm noticing is a lot of comedians are doing very well, which is kind of a global trend as well. There's a new company out called the Podcast Production, and they're really nice people. They're amazing. And they're getting a lot of funding. And they do live shows, and of course they do the podcast, and they have a podcast space. So I think they're going to be the ones to watch out for, because initially they had seed money from within Cairo, but now they have some seed money from Saudi. So I think that's going to be able to elevate them to do a little bit more in the space.
And are they doing mostly audio, or is there quite a lot of video in your world these days?
They're definitely doing video, but the guy that I talked to with the company, Islam, he was saying, because I took my students over to do a field trip to talk to them, and he's saying, like, we're an audio first company. So they always release their audio first, and then they'll do the video, which I think is a smart move in terms of trying to build that listenership first on this end. And they can see the numbers. So what is it doing? What is this particular episode doing in terms of the numbers when it's audio that's released first before the video comes out? So yeah, some people are going down that road of video. It's hard to say that is that going to be a trend? Is that what everyone is going to want or feel the need to do? Because, from a heart of podcasting, it's like we don't really need video. And that's an added element, more labor to do that part of it. So we'll see.
And how is it in terms of, is the money in the industry? I'm wondering whether the advertising market is as developed in your part of the world as well.
Oh, it's definitely developed. I mean, and I know this because I teach in a department of journalism and mass comm, and we have 2 majors, and most of them are in the integrated marketing communication major. So that's your advertising PR. That is where everyone wants to be. And that market is really, really huge in Cairo and in Egypt. But it's a matter of getting those audiences to then, again, pay. So you have to, first of all, you got to figure, where are you getting your data? So as a podcaster, where are you getting your data to let this potential advertiser know this is why it's tricky? And I think sponsorships might have a little bit better of a run, because you could still say, well, you can listen to my podcast and you can kind of understand my demo. I'm trying to reach women who are 18 to 34 or whatever this, as opposed to saying, oh, and I have numbers to show that. Because if you're new, you might not have the data to back that up. So I think a sponsorship might help on a smaller level. for me, Egypt is just going with whatever works for you. A lot of people are doing passion podcasts, so they're not necessarily in it for the advertising, but they have some sort of knowledge to share or just different kinds of interest.
Now, you run a event in Cairo every year. The last one was what? I want to say March, yeah. So how did that go?
It went really well. We had Latif Nasser as our keynote speaker. It was just so much fun to have him in town. And he came to campus to talk to the students. Of course, he had a great keynote speech at PodFest Cairo. And we got a chance to go around to the pyramids and hang out. And Jasmine Bayoumi was also one of our speakers, and she came in from Berlin. So it was just nice to have Latif from Radio Lab and Jasmine, who was she's my former student. Right. So it's like, wow, I had her in my first semester at AUC as I was teaching in Egypt. So to see that she's doing so many really amazing things in the podcasting space was really nice to have those two. Not just for PodFest, but I always make sure that the keynote speakers come to campus and meet the students as well and get a chance to see what we do in that community. So that was really nice.
So how many people were there last year?
We usually get around 50 to 60. PodFest Cairo is not a profit event, and I usually do it by myself. And sometimes I get busier than usual. So we usually get a nice small community of folks who come through, lots of regulars who've been to everyone. Lots of newbies who are just trying to figure out, hey, how is this thing done? Where's my community? That kind of thing. So it's been really a nice event to have on an annual basis. So like I said, we've done 5 years, including the 1 year online during COVID. The other 4 have been face-to-face. So it's a nice event to do.
And tell me about your students finally. Are your students, are they wanting to get into the radio sector? Are they wanting to get into podcasting? How do they see both of those media? Is radio for the old folk and they're not really very interested in it, or how does it work?
We have a commercial radio station. I remember listening to them when I first got to Cairo. It's called Nile FM. And I'm like, is that a cool name or what? It's like Nile FM. And they're very popular. And so, you think about a CHR station, the CHR Contemporary Hit Radio in the US. Our students are listening heavily. So when I thought radio's dead, it's like, no, they know this station and they listen to that station a lot. Now that is one of the few private stations in Cairo. So yeah, are they listening to these other government stations that are on? No, they're probably not. So there's that. And then it's just a matter of, well, what are you listening to and where are you getting your music and where are you sharing knowledge and things like that. So some of them, I've had quite a few who've gone on to do really well in audio, which is amazing. Basant Samut works for Sout out of Jordan. She does really well over there as a producer with that team. And I'm probably forgetting about many of them, but a lot of them are doing really good work. Oh, I have Dina Salahuddin. She just got a job, I want to say, with Audible in Berlin. And somebody else just got a new job, and I was just like, wow, they're doing amazing things. So it's nice to know it started back when and helping them cultivate their stories and see the passion in radio and audio.
So where can we go to find out more about both PodFest Cairo but also the AUC? Oh,
just follow me on that platform, the former Twitter, the X.
And what's your handle on X?
Kim Fox WOSU. There's a story behind that too.
Kim, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Wow. Her voice is actually quite amazing. I think it's quite amazing. It's one of those. I think she should do another podcast. One of those sleep podcasts. And now you can listen to my voice before you go to bed.
No, she was very good. We spent the day looking at kangaroos and koalas and the Tasmanian devils and all kinds of things. So it was good fun to see her. Sorry about all of the bird noise in the background. It turns out that I don't have the equipment to record a podcast apart from just outside on the deck with my little microphone. But it was great to end up seeing her. So hurrah.
It felt authentic, James. I'll give you that. Now,
Thanks.
James, talking about recording stuff, you've been experimenting recently with audio translations. There's been a French version of you. There is a Japanese version of you. There's even a female version of you. What are you up to, James?
Yes, well, I'm playing around with Wondercraft AI, which has a tool in there called Dub. And what you do with it is you upload your audio and it translates it into the language that you choose. So this is a little bit of me speaking a bunch of different languages.
De Asian Podcast Awards worden gelanceerd vanaf de luchthaven van Kuala Lumpur. Het laatste van Podnews, net met Riverside, jouw podcast en video. Singapore 空港からポッドキャストの広告料金が上昇中です。Podnews. Netの最新情報. Australierne er bedre end jeg tåber fra Malaysia, det seneste fra Podnews. Net med Riverside. Un quart de million de vidéopodcasts, les dernières nouvelles de podnews.net avec Riverside.
So it's a pretty impressive thing. And literally all I'm doing there is I'm uploading the voice track from the daily podcast that I do, saying I would like to hear it in, Japanese, which was one of those languages, and it just automatically translates it over. I was actually here in Malaysia. I spoke to somebody from Japan this morning, and I was saying, what do you think of this? And I played him a little bit of me speaking Japanese, and he didn't say, this is awful, this is AI nonsense. He said, wow, that's actually really good. That's kind of sounds very conversational and very good. So yeah, I was really impressed at that.
And with your French, was that close? Were you Parisian in style?
I am told by Mr. Hat, Philippe Chapeau, that I had a Quebec accent, which is interesting. I don't really understand why that might be the case. It may be the British that gets in there somehow. But yes, again, it seemed to work quite nicely. Now, I speak a little bit of French and I was able to understand a little bit of it, and a few bits where they actually edited out some of the sponsor credit, which I thought was interesting. Not quite sure why that was the case. But it appears to be working quite nicely. Now, is this a tool that I would use all the time? I'm not so sure. But is it a little bit of fun to play around with this sort of thing? Yes, absolutely it is.
Is it cost effective? I mean, given that, if you were, I think you were saying you get 300 credits a month. I mean, and this would cost you, 130 credits to do of a 3-minute podcast? I mean, is this a cost-effective model yet?
Yeah, I mean, is it cost-effective? I don't know about that. It's it costs an amount of money to make every single show. I think it would cost somewhere in the region of $3 or $4. What do you get back from that? I don't know. But this is very early doors. So this is both voice cloning my own voice, translation, and making me speak a different language. And some languages have very different mouth sounds than English does. So I think from that point of view, that was really interesting.
Will it help you reach a wider audience? I know people like Diary of a CEO have been playing with Wondercraft to get into many different languages, and it seems that they're getting a wider audience. Would it help Podnews Daily?
I don't know whether you would get a lot of people listening to an AI voice on a daily basis. And from my point of view, of course, the way that Podnews earns its money is people reading the newsletter. The podcast is there because I feel that I have to do a podcast. It's there because it is sponsored by the title sponsor, but it's not necessarily the thing that earns the money. And so I'm, from my point of view, I'm not sure that it is necessarily, a cost-effective thing to do. But you can certainly see that for some other podcasts, yes, it would be interesting to see how they would function if you were to put a Spanish version or or another version in there. What I would say, though, and Wondery have been doing this sort of thing for a long, long time now. What I would say, though, is that you need to be pretty careful in terms of culture, pretty careful in terms of, it's more than just translating. There are other things that you need to end up doing as well.
If I did want to do it for a podcast, not that I have another podcast, if I did want to do it for a podcast, you could use the alternative enclosure, I'm sure, to actually put the English and foreign language alternative audio into that, I'm assuming, because I looked at the actual spec and there is a language option within there, which would help apps then to go, oh, okay, that language is Japanese because there's no way you detect it, or that's French. And then you could actually change the UI a little bit. You could certainly pull in a JSON file on the fly of the transcript. What are your thoughts? I think that's something that I'd love to try and experiment with.
Yes, I think, thinking on it, really, if you're going to produce, let's just say, a Japanese version of the Pod News Daily show, if you're going to produce that, then you can produce the audio, but you also really need to produce a new image so that the words Pod News are visible in Japanese characters. You need to produce a new description because that shouldn't still be in English. You need to produce, basically everything needs to be changed into another language. The RSS standard is pretty clear. It has a language tag right at the top, and the language of a particular RSS feed, to my mind, kind of really ought to be in one language. And if you're certainly going to be using, feed recommendation engines and things like that, then, that needs to be aware of what language something is in, so that if you're in Japan, you recommend the Japanese version to me. So I guess I'm looking at the alternate enclosure specification, and I'm thinking it's great that there is a language attribute in there, but I'm also thinking I'm not sure that that's right. I think that probably the right thing to do is to have, just the same way as we're really supposed to have one RSS feed for one podcast, I think one RSS feed for one podcast in one language is probably the right move. But it's an interesting thought, isn't it, of whether or not you just have one big RSS feed that has all of the different languages of a particular asset in there, but then you'd need all of the different languages of the description, the images, the transcript, all of that. And so I'm not so sure, but I don't know. It's an interesting one. Perhaps if people have strong views either way, then they may like to send us a fan mail. You can click that link that you'll find in the description, or you can send us a boostergram, and we love boostergrams. Those are good. Just press the boost button, and if you don't have one of those, get a new podcast app at podnews.net/new podcast apps. Should we go around the world?
Yes. Okay, let's start. In the USA, Max Cutler's Pave Studios has launched an independent print and audiobook publishing venture called Pave Publishing House. That's interesting. He's going down that road. It is interesting, and I'm sure that there will be a call going out from True Fans Central to Max Cutler saying, have you heard of Medium Equals Book? Audiobook. But no,
this is
will. What do you mean will?
But I think this is interesting. 99% Invisible, of course, has a book out. PodSave America has a book out, and so on and so forth. Again, it comes back to, is the future of monetizing a podcast just purely the advertising model, so perhaps that's an interesting side. The UK, since the general election was announced, there was a 53% increase in unique listens to politics podcasts, according to Acast and Podchaser data, which was nice. The company did an awful lot of advertising for its shows in railway stations in particular. I think railway stations are a brilliant place to advertise a podcast. So I think many congratulations to them for doing that. I got an email from Brad Turpak, who of course used to run Libsyn the other day, and he sent a photograph of a podcast advertising itself in Heathrow Airport in Terminal 2, I think. I think it was in Terminal 2. And that, again, brilliant place to advertise a podcast. Download this just before you get on your flight. So I thought that was a very clever plan.
Nice. Right, moving on, James. People and jobs. Who's moving, who's grooving?
Well, we've got somebody called Flick Heath. She has worked for Persephonica, for Moonbug and the BBC, and she's now joined Gareth at 1860. She is a production manager there. That company is making a ton of different shows, which is nice. And John Wardock has left Cumulus Podcast Network. He's worked there for 5 years and was executive editor and SVP of the network. He is, as they say, looking for a new challenge. And he's a very bright man. I've spent many times chatting to him at various events. It'll be interesting to see where he pops up next. I gather that he's going to Podcast Movement in Washington, as am I, August the 19th. You should be coming to that. There's a new area within the Podcast Movement space called Industry Connect, which is where you can meet people and chat with people as well. If you want to go to Podcast Movement, use the code PODNEWS, and that will save you some money, which is nice. And are you going to PodNews this year, Sam? Have you made that choice?
Yeah. Yes, I will be there, James. Yes.
You will be there. You're not going to Greece.
I am going to Greece. I'm going to be there next week. I'm not here next week with you, as we know, but I will be in Washington. Yes, but I haven't got final details to give you. So yes.
Well, there we are. Something exciting that Sam is planning for Podcast Movement. So how exciting. And of course, there's Podcast Day Asia, one of the reasons why I'm here in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia today, because Podcast Day Asia is happening here September the 3rd, not in a hotel as smart as the one that I'm currently in, but the day includes all kinds of things. Would you like to know what the day includes?
Yes, please.
Yes. Well, let's see if I can very quickly bring that up in front of me and sound as if I know what I'm talking about. So this is on the 3rd of September, Podcast Day. We will hear from people talking about how people are listening to podcasts in places like Japan and the Philippines and the rest of Southeast Asia. Emily Kwong is here from NPR, so she will be talking about making some of the shows that she has been making recently. We've got the winners of the Asian Podcast Awards, which should be fun. We've got people talking about getting their podcasts translated into different languages. Roshni Baroni from India will be talking about her female-led podcast company from there. Timmy from Acast talking about how to make money out of podcasts as well. And a Future of Podcasting panel at the end of the day, which I'm looking after, including a bunch of people who I haven't yet confirmed, so I better not mention those. But anyway, if you want to come, it'd be lovely to see you. Tickets are just $99 and even cheaper if you use the code PODN10. And there are more events, both paid for and free, at PodNews, virtual events, or events in a place with people. And if you're organising something, it's free to tell the world about it. podnews.net/events.
The tech stuff on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, it's the stuff you'll find every Monday in the Pod News newsletter. Here's where Sam and I talk technology for the next 10 minutes.
Yes, between you and a beer. Right, moving on.
Yes.
Podcast hosting company RSS.com has launched a major new update to its podcast web player. I saw this. They talked about it on last week's Podcasting 2.0 show with Adam and Dave. And yeah, if you go and have a look at the desktop version, it's very, very cool. They've created super chapters and you can go full screen and you can have slideshows. It's very cool. Well done to the boys at RSS.com.
Yeah, it's a really nice experience. So congratulations to them. There's a link in the Pod News newsletter earlier on in the week of a show which has that enabled and is worthwhile taking a peek at. And actually, it's interesting seeing how all of these web players are working, because all of a sudden they're getting really good, but also all of a sudden they're getting a load of plays. I noticed that. Did you see how well the Buzzsprout
I did.
Embedded player is doing now?
Yeah, and I think again, I think people are going, well, I can run it on my own website. I can aggregate all of my profile together in one place. I look at Matt Medeiros, for example. You look at his website, he's got an embedded player, he's got his podcast, he's got his blog roll, he's got his everything's all in one place. He's driving it to his brand rather than driving it anywhere else. And embedded players work.
Oh, it is. It's very cool. iOS 18 is continuing apace, some of the beta versions of that. And Mac Rumors has seen something new in Apple Podcasts. Now, I'm not going to mention it because I know that you're not allowed to mention anything in the dev versions of iOS 18, and Apple get very upset with you if you do. If you want to see the same feature, it's already in, true fans. Yes. Because of course it is.
Catch up, Apple.
Of course it is. Podspace, which is a Nordic podcast hosting company, now supports Apple Podcast subscriptions. The artist formerly known as Delegated Delivery, and I noticed that they didn't use that phrase at all.
No, it's been delegated down to the bin. So what is podcast subscriptions now? What do they want it to be?
Well, yes. So this is Apple's thing where you pay to listen to a show, and Apple smother the entire paid-for content in DRM, and they also make it impossible to download anywhere other than for a paid user of the Apple Podcasts app for that particular show. So therefore, you have to upload the audio to Apple Podcasts. That's basically what's going on there. And the reason why companies end up working with Apple to do this is so that if you're a podcast hosting company, you can upload your paid-for audio straight to Apple without directing your users to use another platform. Quite nice that Podspace is doing this. It's a small Nordic podcast hosting company, but it's one more added to the big list of people who are doing that.
Now, I said I talked to Ellie Rubenstein, who's head of podcasting at Pocketcast last night, and we were talking about they have launched a new Mac and Windows desktop version, which is very nice. You can go and play with that. They're also testing a new beta of a web app. So strangely, they're going the other way. So they've got native apps and now they're going to the web. What's going on in this world? But what they are using as a development platform is a tool called electronjs.org, which is actually very cool. If you want to build native Windows and Mac desktop apps, then yes, it's a very good platform to use. Strangely, yes, I might be using it.
Oh, well, there you go. Maybe that's the tool. Finally, some interesting stuff going on around Wavelake. So Wavelake is one of these music streaming services. If you're a fan of Podcasting 2.0, then you will be aware of Wavelake because they are one of the larger companies allowing you to listen to tracks and pay in a value-for-value type fashion as you have a listen to those particular tracks. Anyway, they have partnered with Zebedee, which is one of these payment infrastructure companies. Essentially, I think that they were just doing their own thing using Lightning, and now they've partnered with this company. It seems to be part of the big shakedown of these tools in terms of the financial compliance and all of that kind of stuff. Does this mean, Sam, that we are essentially moving from a world where everything used to be centered around Alby and now everything's going to be centered around the Zebedee platform, our beautiful open podcasting plan?
Yeah. Not quite. I mean, look, Fountain uses Zebedee. They're in. I think Zebedee are invested into Fountain. I wonder whether they've invested into Wavelake. Zebedee is a wallet provider, and it has licenses, which is the critical part. And they use the Lightning Network, but they also are very heavily involved in Nostr. And I know Wavelake and Fountain are very high proponents of the Nostr network. Some of the radio stuff that Fountain did was all about Nostr payments, Wavelake are very keen to use their ticketing with Nostr. So I think you're beginning to see not so much a decentralization to Zebedee from Alby, but you're seeing a split, I think, in the podcasting market between payment provider platforms. I wonder which other one, Podverse, Podfriends, might go there. Who knows? We have upgraded to the Alby hub. Our Alby API still works. Our payments through Lightning still work. Everything is tickety-boo on that side. We can still sign up non-US people. We still have an issue with US. Now, I saw the US ruling come out on what Alby was worried about, the crypto tax issue. And if you read it in detail, it's really about NFTs. It's not about micropayments, and it's not about $20 here or there. What it is people have been putting significant assets into NFTs and then trading those NFTs and not declaring the tax element of it. And that's what they're stamping down on, not the you need a small micropayment license. Now, as of next week, we will be a wallet provider. As of next week, we will allow you to use a Lightning wallet on TrueFans and get a new one in the US and in the UK and in Europe and in Australia. And we, in effect, are taking the place of Alby, which they've seeded. So, yeah.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating times in terms of monetization platforms. I heard Adam and Dave talking about eCash and Mint and all kinds of completely impenetrable stuff that I didn't fully understand. But I mean, very clearly that there's stuff going on there which is worthwhile keeping an eye out. And and I'm sure that you'll be working with all of that too. But yes, it's certainly interesting times.
Boostergrams, and fan mail on the Pod News Weekly Review.
Yes, let's jump into Boostergrams and fan mail very quickly. We've just got the one, and it's for 10,000 sats. Thank you, Adam Curry, who has sent us a quick boost saying, support your podcasters with boosts. Yes, we agree. So thank you, Adam, for that. Thank you also to our power supporters, Dave Jackson, Mike Hamilton, Matt Medeiros, Marshall Brown and Cameron Mole, all of which have gone to weekly.podnews.net and become a power supporter. We appreciate that. That means money coming in every single month for us. So most appreciated. So what's happened for you this week, Sam?
Well, we launched a new blogging integration into TrueFans. So we were talking about Matt Medeiros earlier. We were talking about how you could aggregate on his own website all of his podcasts and blogs. And we've taken that same sort of strategy and we've gone the other way. We've said you can either, if you don't have a blog and you want to, you can create one in your admin dashboard, or you can just put your RSS feed. And so I'll be putting out, you'll be seeing it across all the socials later today, examples of that. So that's going to be quite interesting. Again, one of the things we're doing is allowing you to have paid blogging. So you can turn that on and have people pay for your posts in sats as they scroll down the page, or pay in advance using fiat. So yeah, we'll see if it works. I mean, again, it's just good fun experimenting with this stuff and seeing what sticks against the wall, really. No,
very cool. And you're on a podcast this week with Matthew McLean, the podcast host, talking about what is podcasting 2.0 and why should I care, which was very cool. Recorded at the London Podcast Show. That's taken its time to come out, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. But I have to say, hat tip to Matthew. We were sat outside in that cafe, which you can imagine is quite noisy, by the Acast bar. And if you listen to the podcast, it's crystal clear. Well done, Matthew. I don't know, you had a very cool, old-fashioned, in my opinion. It wasn't one of these, Rode mic lapel things. It was like a proper solid box with mics. And he's managed to get all the background noise out. And yeah, I really enjoyed doing it. If you want to see what's going on with Podcasting 2.0, I thought Matthew asked the right questions.
Exactly. And I'm here in Kuala Lumpur. I sat through a fascinating piece from the Chinese state broadcaster CGTN, who are using AI to produce a documentary in lots of different languages. And they had three of their Chinese presenters telling us how they did it. And I was looking at the video and thinking, they're not actually talking, are they? And it was unveiled at the end of the video that, of course, their voices were also done with AI because they only speak one of the Chinese languages. So it was a very impressive thing, albeit slightly weird. So it was good seeing that there. Also good in inverted commas, seeing the Russia Today folk who are sponsoring this particular event. So it's one of the first times I think that the Pod News logo has been next to a Russia Today one. So yes, there's a thing. But still looking forward to being back here in a month or two for Podcast Day Asia. And that's it for this week. If you enjoy the podcast, the newsletters better, you can find it at podnews.net, Pod News Daily as well, wherever you get your podcast. And there are longer versions of all of the interviews we do in the Pod News Extra podcast as well.
You can support the show by streaming sats. You can give us feedback using fan mail or send us a boostergram if you want to tell us more about the show.
Our music is from Studio Dragonfly. Our voiceover is Sheila D. This crystal clear audio, almost, today has been through CleanFeed, and we're hosted and sponsored by Buzzsprout. Podcast hosting made easy.
Get updated every day. Subscribe to our newsletter at podnews.net. Tell your friends and grow the show.
And support us.
The Pod News Weekly Review will return next week. Keep listening.